कैसे हैं आप
सर?
क्या हाल है मित्तल साहब?
At the start of each session, we play this Indian band of Great Wanda every time.
So what is the format like?
Sir, you would be, like after a brief introduction, you would be presenting the entire subject to the audience.
Okay,
and then
just,
questions after
okay,
that.
for about half an hour?
Half an hour is good, sir.
Okay.
19 hours.
Namaskar. Hello and welcome to today's discourse on defense and strategic affairs. And we have been joined in by a very, very esteemed guest today. We have got Ambassador Anil Trigunayat sir today, who would be illumining us on the very strategic theater of Indo-African relationship. A billion people to a billion people connect. That is what will be the subject matter of today. We are really fortunate to have sir in today's session. We started off with the Kashmir issue. We went on with Commodore Ranjit Rai sir on the Indian Ocean entire theater over there. Then we will remind about the Pakistan, China, and India triangle by Major General C.P. Singh Sahab. So this journey has been really adding and evolving as we are passing every Saturday, the strategic Saturdays as we call. And today we have Ambassador Anil Trigunayat sir, who is a former Indian ambassador to Libya, Jordan, and Malta. And he is a distinguished fellow of the Vivekananda International Foundation, a foundation which is really the current NSA, and a host of other people on the strategic affairs over there. So I pass on to my co-host Prabhat Ghosh sir to introduce Anil sir further, his entire luminescence in the entire space of defense and strategic affairs, and then we will request sir to illumine us on the subject today. Prabhat sir.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. Good evening, Raghav sir. Good evening, sir. Anil
Good
sir.
evening, Ghosh Saab, how are you?
Good, all good, sir. All good, sir. We have been in touch for long, and now we are
Yes.
fortunate to have you on board.
Thank
So
you.
it's indeed a pleasure for us, indeed a privilege for us to have you on board.
Thank you.
So basically, sir, like we started with, what Raghav sir told, we started with Kashmir issue, and then ranging on to different variety of topics with different, personalities in Indian Navy, then Indian Army as well, Major General C.P. Singh Sahab. So today we are going to listen to you on Indo-African strategic thing, Indo-African relations. Basically, recently on the call of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, India has taken several initiatives in the matters of in the matter of Africa. This African vaccine initiative and all that that are there. So we would like to have you. We would like to listen from you as well. What is there in that. So without taking much of time, sir, please, we welcome you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Ghosh. Thank you, Mr. Mittal. It is a great pleasure for me to be addressing through your esteemed forum, Rethink India and the Strategic Affairs. I have been associated with Mr. Ghosh for some time now. And when you asked me to share my thoughts, normally I do talk about West Asia, but Africa is of a particular interest for me for many reasons. Firstly, that used to be my first posting in Côte d'Ivoire in West Africa, where I was really exposed to it. Before that, of course, I had a lot of my friends from Africa in JNU. So that it held a lot of traction for me from that point of view. And when I lived there, it really widened my horizons to the kaleidoscope of culture, the diversity, the richness, and the beauty of the African people. And that's when, from there, of course, I have served in Africa in my whole career. About 1/3 of the career I have spent in Africa, covering about more than a dozen countries. And I find that there is a lot that could have been done. A lot has been done, and a lot needs to be done as far as India and Africa relationship is concerned. And there is currently, so how I plan to talk about is, I want to first talk a little bit about Africa itself. Then I would like to talk about the countries that are involved there, major, some of whom are challenges for us, and then come to what India is doing and what can more be done. I think in about 30 minutes, I'll try to cover that. So let us begin with this, that Africa, first premise, let's say, is Africa is a rich continent where poor people live. Now, this is a country, as was mentioned by Mr. Raghav, 1 billion people, 2 billion people. So nearly the same populations we have and nearly the same GDP. So what we can do together is immense. But Africa is not one country. It's 54 countries. Very often we talk of Africa as if we are talking about one country. It has similar kind of diversity in languages, in culture, in their ethos, in their mores, in their cultural traits, and the outlook to the world. Everything is tribes, colors, their beautiful dresses. And it has provided a very large number of international intellectual leaders, including the Secretary General of the United Nations. And it has moved a lot from a vision of individualistic nations that came out during the colonial struggle, in which India really helped them a great deal after its own independence. And so their vision is for Pan-Africanism. And like now they want to come together as an Africa. So there have been efforts, firstly of regionalism, sub-regionalism, and then a collective self-reliance, which is like Pan-Africanism, which in some ways matches with our Atmanirbhar initiative that has been launched by Prime Minister Modi. But today, Africa is also suffering a great deal from the kind of diversified approaches of the world, because a large number of the countries are suffering from the pandemic like anybody else. And they are also suffering from something called vaccine apartheid. And the world especially the rich world, has been cornering large quantities of these vaccines and is providing as and when required on the basis of their geopolitical initiatives or humanitarian concern. But in the meantime, these countries have been suffering a great deal. I was just reading a tweet in which there was said that Rwanda, which is comparatively a very modern country, in a very short time, has been able to inoculate only about 3% of the population. All over Africa, it's less than 1%. They need about 225 million more vaccines. The economies have tanked. And you know that in Africa, out of the top 10 fastest growing economies, 5 or 6 were coming out of Africa, and that too in sub-Saharan Africa, that very often one does not credit with great success. So I personally feel that the world is going to be a great change after the pandemic. And therefore, the 4 H, which I call as, are going to be the major challenges for any country, any continent, any group. And those 4 H are: number 1, hunger. That has been a perennial problem. Second is health. The whole world has come to see the infrastructural constraints that we are facing. Then the habitat is very important. So we are looking at the climate change. And lastly, and not the least, is the high tech and high growth. Because see, if you do not have the high technology or the relevant technologies available to you, you cannot fight. And one more thing that has come about in Africa is the growth of extremism and terrorism. And that is making their life even more difficult. We are hearing every second day that the children, the women, the girls, students are picked up in Nigeria with hundreds of them by Boko Haram or some other groups. We have heard about Al-Shabaab in Somalia, and we are hearing Al-Qaeda in Arabian Peninsula, which are working in different countries. So these are some of the challenges which will be very important to deal with, because see, you cannot deal with one and not deal with the other. So it is extremely important that the world has to come together to help if they want to, which is not true. So therefore, in order to achieve an African resurgence, it is important that the sub-regionalism graduates to regionalism and regionalism graduates to continentalism. And that's what we are looking at, something which is happening in the course of last few years when Africans decided, they have many institutions like African Union, African Development Bank, and regional organizations, many of them. and they have customs unions and what within that. But they decided that let us have a continent-wide, which is called Continental Free Trade Agreement, so that they can just work together. Now, what does it seek to do? It seeks to create a continental market for goods and services with free movement of business people. You will be surprised at the kind of restrictions and connectivity problems between the two countries are. It's very difficult to move about in Africa. So they are thinking that by 2030, it will be achievable. And African market size is going to reach about 1.7 billion with a combined and cumulative consumer and business spending of about $6.7 trillion. So that is a very big opportunity for anyone who is looking at that. Now, countries are, some of them are coming out of the pandemic impact, but most of the emerging market countries or smaller have not been able to or will not be able to, according to various studies, come up to the income levels of pre-pandemic income levels by 2022. So this is going to be a very uncertain global scenario economically. On the contrary, what will happen is with this, their SDGs, their level of living, their employment, all these will impact. And that is also, we are seeing now a conflict in large part of Africa, different countries. There is no smooth transition of power. You have seen in Mali what happened. We are seeing what is happening in Tigray, in Ethiopia. We are seeing what is happening even in South Africa for that matter. So in every place, we are having those kind of problems in Africa, which is, of course, a direct impact of the pandemic, underdevelopment, and the growth. So they need to now move to the very next. They don't have to go through a median of difficulties forever, but they need to work with the trade and investment as the robust engine of growth. So when the African leaders say that we want trade, not aid, they mean it, because they don't want to accumulate greater debts on them. So they are looking for different kind of methodologies whereby they could become stakeholders in their own progress. And that's what is happening. So that they can take care of the financial stress that that is caused by the elevated debt levels. And they can deal with the rising food prices, rising living cost, and the problems that most of the countries are facing. So I find that today Africa is in a rather despondent situation. The world is somewhat engaged and mostly disengaged. Engaged in the sense is that the countries like China and others, and the USA even now have started, are trying to provide and help assist them in this thing. India has already done before the first phase and will be doing in the second phase as soon as it's possible to do so. Now you can imagine the plight of a country like Congo, for example, Republic of Congo, where COVID-19, nearly 5% of their total parliamentarians died of the COVID-19. You could imagine. There is a tremendous amount of not only accessibility of the vaccine, but also the vaccine hesitancy. And like in countries like Ivory Coast or Zimbabwe or Malawi for that matter, their doses were really, they expired because they could not use them. They could just use about 17, 18, 19% doses because of the hesitancy, because of the kind of misinformation that is. So this is another very major problem that they are facing. For example, one of the groups, these terrorist groups, Al-Shabaab and all that, they started saying, that this is against the ethos of the Islam or something like that. So we are listening to these kind of stupidities everywhere, and these are what causing major problems. Now, if you were to look at it now, it's a rich country, rich continent, whether in diamonds, in gold, in oil, gas, minerals, all kinds of minerals, agriculture, everywhere. Whatever you name, it is a rich country, which is made poor by its own people and leaders. And but it wants to come out of that. It is a great opportunity for the world. Now, what do the people which are going there? Then nothing as much has changed. They were earlier, as you know, that nearly all colonial powers had controlled the region. So basically what they want, most of the countries, what are the motivations? Number one, they want to assist in apparently, overtly, in resolving the continent's political, economic, and social challenges. Now, they don't want to empower them to do that directly, in that sense of the term, but they want to still keep their stakes there. Second is benefit from the African markets, minerals, hydrocarbons, as I mentioned, natural commodities, vast land and oceanic resources. And thirdly, it's ensure the security for their supplies. Suppose you are importing oil from, like India does, 11, 12% from Nigeria. So you would like that the maritime routes there are not subjected to piracy and is not also a problem. So America, for example, has created a special force called AFRICOM. And India has been engaged also in anti-ops in Somalia, anti-piracy operations. Several navies are involved. So that is something. And lastly, they want to seek the geopolitical influence. Now, for example, you see now in the Indo-Pacific that everybody hears these days, there also eastern part of Africa has a much greater role to play because that falls within the ambit of our Indian Ocean Navy's initiative or Sagar strategies or others. And China, of course, is constructing its major ports developments and roads and trains developments along the eastern highways and creating and connecting them. Djibouti, for example, as a land, is it located at the Horn of Africa and it become a place for everybody's enterprise. France has a military base, Americans have a military base, Chinese have a military base there, Italy and Turkey have the military bases, Spain and Germany have. Everybody seems to have the bases there. And China is, of course, one of the biggest with its increased interest in this place and has been putting its PLA Navy there. So what we look at this China policy is something which has been engaged, and I remember from my very first posting that its policy has been twofold. One is that it wanted the African countries who were looking for investments, infrastructure development, to believe in one China policy. That was one of the first objectives. So therefore, wherever there was a Taiwanese mission, they wanted that to be closed and replaced by the Chinese embassy. Today, a situation has come where almost all countries in Africa follow the one China policy. Then to further take it forward, it created an institutional mechanism, which is called FOCA, whereby they invite all the African country leaders and they try to discuss with them various projects, provide funding, debts, and loans, and do the infrastructure work there, very often in exchange for various commodities. And so they are doing that, which is, of course, the others are also doing the same. Because when the Americans started talking about China's exploitation in Africa, the Africans said, then what have you done all these years? You have also exploited us. If it is a neo-colonialism of sort, you have also done the same. But China at least is leaving all the infrastructure there. So Chinese, what they have done is, because of the kind of billions and billions of dollars investments and the huge trade and a kind of assets that they have created, both strategic and commercial. So that has, and also in keeping with their BRI objectives. So that is something that gives China the kind of heft that they have acquired over the last, at least I would say 30, 40 years, and which is an amazing experience. It's worth studying. Very often what happens in India is when we read a negative article about China's role in Africa, calling it a dead diplomacy or the Western media or something like that, we try to comfort ourselves. Oh, that's a great thing that is happening. Nothing can be farther than the truth. Hello?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Any problem?
No, sir.
Okay. So we tend to take umbrage and take a little satisfaction in that thing. This is, in my view, an absolutely misplaced way of looking at things. You must learn from the mistakes of the others and the successes as well. That's very important because your competitor must be seen in the fair light. Otherwise, you will not be able to respond to that. And China is the global competitor and target for every country in the world today, major country in the world. So it is increasing. It's opened large number of Confucius centers in spreading the culture, the language. It is training them militarily. They're selling arms, ammunition, and everything. So it's going on in a very big way in a concerted manner. into Africa or wherever else it goes. But now that we are talking about Africa, so it's in billions of dollars. It also, when it saw that many of these countries were not able to pay back their debts, it wrote off during the last meeting when it provided $60 billion additional funding over a certain period of years. So we see. Secondly, you must remember one thing is how Chinese enter. Very often we say, oh, Chinese bring their own people. They don't provide employment. They do this or that, something like that. It's good. It's true. It's not liked by the Africans because they would prefer to have jobs if there is tremendous poverty. But what they do is because they bring them, whether it is their jail people or whatever it is, they bring them there. Now they station them there, and whether it is in agriculture fields or whether it is infrastructure development. And then they create an infrastructure within the shortest possible time than any other country has been able to do that. And this is what gives them the advantage over all other countries in the world. Nobody else has been able to execute the projects with the speed and, of course, now with quality as well.
Right.
There are always some problems. So we see that that's a problem. Now, comparing to that, what do you see the Americans doing it? Now, I will not go into the history, even though Trump called them shithole or whatever it is. That's a different thing. But the US policy in Africa is basically devised according to what China does, to counter Chinese influence, not necessarily to protect the African interests. They, of course, in their humanitarian assistance, they always talk about challenges of poverty, hunger, disease, and all that. So this goes on. But the governance has been a major problem for them. So they came up with something called Africa Growth and Opportunity Act, AGOA, which provided duty-free treatment for all the African goods that were coming into the American market. Now, they have their US Agency for Development, USAID, everybody would have heard the name. So they are the ones that are working on all these various kinds of projects. So they increase their trade, let me say, up to about $100 billion. And then now today it's about $35, $40, $50, $57 billion in 2019. So it's been going down, not going up. It is something that is an interesting thing. As far as Russia is concerned, I think during the Soviet times, they were very, very powerful, very, very engaged in Africa and Soviet Union. And it was also a former part of the Cold War scenario, where they were trying to support the non-aligned countries and the new people coming out of the yoke of colonialism and all that. So they were very much there. So initially they had very big projects, but again, they just went down because of their own economic plight and the disintegration of Soviet Union. But in 2006, Putin again came up with his strategy, and they have started investing in different areas, the big steel mills, or in the oil and gas sector, or in the minerals, and strategically. They have also started something called Russia Africa Summit, which was held in Sochi, and it's a regular feature. So that provides them this kind of an heft that they are looking for, increasing, and there is an increased competition. Now, I'll just give you an example of Libya in this case. The rest of them are not so current, but Libya is a place where we have seen that when the Arab Spring happened 10 years ago, the Americans and the French and NATO decided to intervene to so-called fight to protect, and bombed Libya. We were there in the UN Security Council at the time, like this time. We were also there, and the Russians were there too. But it was decided that we will allow this because it was projected as if there was going to be big massacres happen. So in the process, the Russians understood the lesson that they were completely cut out of the system. So they immediately, as soon as they got a point, whether it was in Syria or whether going to Libya, which is a part of North Africa, and today with their Wagner group, with their presence there, they're planning to have a base there. So they've been supporting one side, that is of General Haftar in that. So they've become a case. Similarly, Turkey, which has been looking to come into Africa quite in a big way. It flies several places. It has increased its number of bases, a number of, not bases, the number of missions, diplomatic missions in different parts. President Erdogan has traveled tremendously across Africa, making friends. And again, in Libya, they are supporting the group which is opposed to the Russian group or the French group or something like that. So there are these kind of, in one country, you are seeing the competition of almost all major powers happening there. So that's kind of an example that we see now what happens. And it's not only for resources, but it's for strategic locations that this continent and many of these countries provide. One more thing is China's is that it doesn't care how the country is run. It does not bother about democracy. It does not bother about anything. It is depends on a country. It has an infrastructure related approach. But how does it help them? So they get the investment capital. They create significant infrastructure. You will be surprised if you visit most of the African countries. You will find that wherever China is, they create a huge stadium. They'll create a big building for the government. They will provide big roads, hospitals, and all those kind of things, which impact directly the people. They tend to benefit from that. So this is something that works out well. And of course, there is always a problem which can happen with any country. So that's something we know that is going to be an issue for a long time for Chinese, how to handle that, this issue. Then let me talk a little bit about British and Americans and the French all have very similar kind of things because they were all colonial powers. So they have their own institutional arrangements with the various countries. In the same context, you can see the European Union also operating there. It had started its Africa EU summit. It has its Africa EU strategy at one time, which started in 2017. So we are looking at this thing, and the trade is quite high with them. About 33% of African total exports go to the European Union, and about 41% of imports. So they have become a very major partner, but not a significant strategic partner in the sense that we are looking at their possibility. Another country that let me talk about is Japan. Japan is extremely important from their perspective because Japan is the largest ODA giver in the region. And it has been working very well. And now they also one of the first which started this something called TICAD, which means Tokyo International Conference on African Development. So this is something under this. So far, this was ODA driven, but they are moving from ODA towards private sector investment. And that is why today we call something Asia-Africa Growth Corridor between India and Japan trying to work together in Africa. And that is our trilateral cooperation that we are working with this. Now let me come to India and Africa, which is why we are here today. For 10 minutes, I'll spend on this. Now let me tell you that as far as Africa is concerned, our approach has been, after the 1960s, has been rather ad hoc for our domestic reasons and because of the reasons things were happening around the world. We became the leaders of the NAM. We helped the countries in achieving their independence. We created a forum to address their grievances. We were very much there. But over time, our approach became quite ad hoc. We did not have any high-level visits. There were no high-level exchanges. There were no focused strategy what to do. Although I must admit that in 1964, India started its Indian Technical and Economic Cooperation Program, which is a capacity building program, and in which Africans are the largest beneficiaries. And India assisted them through training. It has this program called Share and Care. It calls it, that's the essence of it. Like we talk Vasudha Kutumbakam, it's very similar to that. So whatever we have, we share with them. And this is something they appreciated, the African nations. They understood India as a benign country. But you need, when the other competition is there, then you need to have a strategic competition that is very important, because we cannot just get away by saying, oh, we have historic and umbilical relationship, and because we both were colonized countries, we fought against apartheid, and those are the kind of things that exist. But are they there? Then we started several initiatives thereafter. One was this India-Africa Forum Summit, which started in 2008. And then we have Dr. Kalam's very big initiative, which was called Pan-Africa E-Network Initiative. In addition, there were many smaller initiatives at the sub-regional basis called Nepal and all. So India continued to assist them, but since there were no high-level exchanges, and those countries felt that India was just not giving them enough respect. Their leaders felt that way. And we are fortunate in one sense that there were many leaders who have been trained in India, whether the army or the civilian leaders. Many of the countries have army officers as their heads. So they are your natural reserve, and they really expected you, and they liked India to play a greater role. And that's why in the 60s, 70s, we had done a lot of infrastructure, but then we were absent when Chinese got in, and they got this. Plus, we have a 2 million, nearly 2.5 million strong, very, very successful Indian diaspora. They are today one of the most powerful people in their own countries, where they're successful also, where they are working. So they are the connect that they have. Of course, they have left several generations ago, but still that is something that keeps it. I can tell you one small example of my stay in Nigeria with two presidents. And now the current president are also an alumni of an Indian Army Institute. I was there when President Obasanjo was the president of Nigeria. I arrived there. We had a major problem in some of our investments, and I had no option but to request a meeting with the president. Now I cannot just go and call on the president. What I did was I tried to look around, and I was just week old. And so I asked some of these major Indian industrialists of Indian origin, I would say, who have been living there. And I asked, can you help me? And you will not believe that within 2 days' time, I got a call on the president himself. And the president said two things to me. He did the work for which I had gone to him. He said, I know India better than you. And second thing, he said that I want you to work here more, increase your exposure in this country. And he said that the Indians here, after the Africans, after the Nigerian government, federal government, they are the second largest employment generators in Nigeria. Now that is a big thing. It carries the kind of message that you want to give to the country, that, oh, India, yeah, yes, they are looking after our people. So that was a big plus for us. And this is the plus that they are all looking at. And then we had this Pan-Africa e-network, which is a very important initiative India had, which was about e-governance, about telemedicine, tele-education, connecting the universities in India and in Africa, making all the leaders talk on the profound satellite-based communication network, which has now recently again improved by this current government, as called as E-Vidya Bharati and Arogya Bharati, health and education becoming the major. India has also always helped them in the healthcare sector, whether it was the AIDS, which was rampant there, or it was Ebola, or any time. I mean, we have been always involved in helping them. One more thing was very important for creating our footprints there was the presence of a large number of Indian teachers and professors, especially in maths and sciences. And in fact, President Yaradua later on, who succeeded Obasanjo, he told me, he says, can you find Professor Singh, who was my teacher? Of course, fortunately, he passed away. But every time he used to ask. He even told Dr. Manmohan Singh, when I was able to get him to Nigeria to visit, that this is something that always mentioned about the Indian teachers. So that gives you, the kind of P2P connect as we talk. So that is very much there. India has also, of course, helped set up several national defense academies there, train many of the army officers. Now we are doing it in counterterrorism a great deal. I went to Nigerian Railways office actually to look for one project which was told to me by President Obasanjo. And I was surprised to see when I went to the office and I saw the first, second, and third chairmen were the Indians, one Mr. Rao and the two others. And the photos were displayed in the office of the chairman at the time. So they respected you, they like you. So what does it mean? That you need to be a little more outgoing. You must be showing them your concern, not only just that you are giving them some line of credit or some this thing or that thing. So they are very much keen. They are proud people. They want to be seen, and they want that their own resources are leveraged for their own advantage. So this is very important. Now, I find that Prime Minister Modi's time, the two things have happened. One was that this government took upon the task of connecting with their leaders. For example, we started having large number of visits of President, Prime Minister, and Vice President and the ministers to nearly all African countries. So it was like 36 odd visits have taken place. Never large number of countries, nobody had ever visited for decades or not at all. So that was one thing which was a major deficit. It has been bridged during the last 6-7 years that I have seen. Second, we have really no known policy. How are we going to proceed? So then Prime Minister Modi, when he was addressing the Kampala in Uganda, the parliament in Kampala, he outlined his Africa vision, and which he called 10 guiding principles. And let me just read out those. Firstly, it says that Africa is among our top priorities for India, and the momentum of cooperation will be sustained through regular exchanges. So I've already mentioned to you the development partnership as per African priority. See what is more important. Very often we think we know better than them. That's not true. They know what they want. Then preferential access to Indian markets. We have been giving it for a long time, DFTP and all the schemes. Harness their digital revolution in Africa. Improve their agricultural potential. I mean, they have plenty of land, but it's not being plowed. Yeah, they have, and fight the climate change. The climate change is a universal problem. That is only, it's important for us to do that. And work together to keep the oceans and maritime routes, which are very important, free for all, which is what we are saying. It is also, you can see it, it's a component that figures from our Indo-Pacific strategy. So, and we also do not want Africa to become a theater of competition in the sense that it should rather look after itself, its own people, its own youth. And so India wants to work together with them for a just, representative, global democratic order. So these are ideal, naturally good ideals. They're achievable and collaborative policies. So we need to work together for that. It's extremely important because most of the countries you will find and listen to is about there is a gold rush. Okay, let's just rush to Africa for our own advantage. But India has not been looking at it in that term, I would say. So therefore, and it was again recently when there was a UN Security Council, there were some debates and our External Affairs Minister was there on Africa, especially in the wake of vaccines. So he said that the world must stand by Africa in this crisis. India made a clarion call. And not only that, we approached the WTO and the WHO, asking them to lift the IPRs temporarily on the vaccines so that more and more African countries can use that. Today, maximum 1% of the vaccines they need are produced in Africa. And COVID vaccine, of course not. Only it's now that Egypt will be producing the Chinese vaccine and so will the Morocco. But it is not there yet. That will take time. So that's very important. India had also provided equipment, training programs, and others to more than 42 countries, Africa. So we are working with them in every which way. We have nearly 189 projects in 41 African countries with about $11 billion in investments given as lines of credit and others. So whatever India has the Africa Forum Summit, we have had 3 of them. Now the 4th Africa Forum Summit is planned. It was been already delayed. Maybe it will be held in Mauritania or somewhere else. So we'll come to see. India also focuses on the UN Security Council reforms, in which the African countries are extremely important partners for us. And therefore, whenever we talk in the UNSC, we say that Africa really has no voice in the UNSC. So therefore, it should be present there. They need a permanent seat in that or non-permanent category. So expansion in accordance with something called a Zuelini consensus, it should be there. So Africa should have its own chance, like India claims its right to be in the UN Security Council. But India stands for that. Now, as far as security is concerned, I touched upon is that it is very important. We have been there in nearly 22 peacekeeping missions in Africa. In fact, I met President Sirleaf of Liberia in Nigeria when she was awarded with the Democracy Award or something. And she told me first thing, she said, I want to tell you, Ambassador, the Indian women police force, which was deployed there under the UN aegis, has done remarkably well. That was the first of its kind. So they are very keen to work with us, and therefore we have. Similarly, they have their own Africa peace and security architecture. Can we work with them, with the AU and others? Can we find some kind of a grouping there? That is an area, whether it is under the IURA or whether under our Sagar strategy. We have to also look at security in the Gulf of Guinea. It is very important from our perspective. We need to find new partners, whether it is US, whether it is UK, whether it is France, or whether it is Japan, or UAE now, or Israel for that matter, to work together in third country initiatives in these countries. Most importantly, as the digital revolution comes about, India has an edge and can work together with these countries. So we need to work with them, the newer areas, so they're empowered to work with you together by the time they take over the next part of this century, when I feel that Africa, we will look at the Afro-Asian century. Terrorism, there are a teen number of groups there. They are creating havoc in the countries. And they are also stunting the growth of economy and creating a political vacuum in these countries. They're creating conflicts in these countries. So it is extremely important that the world stands up, India especially, try to help them a little more in these regions. I think that we have to do more. What is the problem that we are facing now? Of course, their expectations are high from India, because India is seen as a model country, but they are following the Chinese model development because Chinese are very much there all the time. They're able to deliver. Their foreign minister actually visits, first visit in every year is by the foreign minister to Africa. The president nearly goes every year to some of the African countries. And those are things that really matter a great deal. So, but in our case, what happens is we have a lot of projects, and the constant refrain about India has been that India has promised but has not delivered. So I think, but of course, if you talk to the government agency, they'll say we have done this, we have done that. I always say something. Look at what you have not done. Mm-hmm. That is the most important. Glass we can see as half full, but we must see why it is empty. And that is extremely important. If you want to compete with the likes of Chinese, I must say there is a reservoir of goodwill for India, but mere goodwill cannot make you succeed in any theater of competition. You have to come with a hard cash, hard willpower, and a consistency and reliability. That is extremely important. And so I would think I'll stop it here. And if there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer. Thank you.
I think the best comment what sir made was about the Afro-Asian century, the term what sir invoked, that is really very, very aspirational and very interesting, connecting the African aspiration with the Asian one. That is truly there, and how Africa has become the, I would say, the conflict zone for all the major powers. That is something very much over there. Sabhi ka ghamasan wahan macha hua hai. And so one query over here. Mm-hmm. India seems to be driven more from a philanthropic and its big brotherly attitude rather than the crass commercial or geostrategic measures, like as you mentioned about China. So why is it so? Are we not getting any strategic benefit from Africa per se, or are we not in that stage still?
No, it's not. I mean, of course, India's philosophy, as you know, I mean, now everybody talks about Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam and all that. These go a long way. Now, when I'm saying that the kind of goodwill you have for India that's why the Japan, the US, the UK, everybody is coming to you. Mm-hmm. Because in order to counter the Chinese, China brings in hard cash. Its pockets are full. It can deliver the projects very quickly. We were not in the game of exporting capital because we don't have that. That's very simple. So what we have is we have acquired a certain expertise, a certain philosophy, and that's what we've been sharing with them, which was they greatly appreciate, because we are creating a critical mass of people in those countries, their own capabilities. So that's why they prefer our AAA kind of initiatives, affordable, accessible, adaptable. That has been our approach to these countries. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, the business is to be done by the businessman, but we need to have a PPP model. I always believe that we should have at least 10, 20 big companies whose target market should be Africa. And not only that import-export, but we need to develop industries there for third country exports, because see, they also want value addition. Today, most of the African leaders, if you talk to them, that if you will come and say, give me $10 million line of credit, $100 million line of credit. I remember when I tried to give it to Nigeria, they did not avail it. Forget about that. I mean, I went to Equatorial Guinea, which is also an oil-rich country. We had given it to $15 million to them just to put up some kind of a plant. They said your terms and conditions are not good enough for us. Chinese terms and conditions are far better. Of course, they become eventually indebted to them, and they even lose the sovereignty over many issues. But then, what do they say? They say, look at this building, look at this stadium, look at this road. Is it going away anywhere? It is for us, our use. We are using it, is it not? So, you know, when I said in the beginning, we have to be careful in our own narratives. I mean, we must see the reality on the ground. That is very important. And the reality is that we must try to not make the same mistakes that the Chinese do, number one. For example, a little problem of racism during the COVID time, and there was a big furor in Africa. You know, in India, if one African student is beaten up or something like that, you know what happens. But we try to cover it up. Our media will not talk. We will be just trying to, no, nothing happened. We love everybody. That is not true. Right. So wherever there are problems, if my prime minister goes to some country and say, we'll invest $1 billion, and after 5 years, $1 billion are not even seen somewhere, then on what face I can go and talk to them as an ambassador or as a representative or next time when I go? So it should not be the case. We should have a blueprint of projects beforehand, in which country, what we are going to do, what the industry will do, what the government companies will do, and what will be India's government's contribution in that, because they are looking at it. So if we go with a much better, and then most important thing is, you have projects which are not delivered in time, right? So this is also our job, you know, as ambassadors, to see to it that the projects are completed well within time. If not, those companies should be blacklisted forever. I mean, you know, we need to take some harsh measures. In my view, you can spoil a market or your goodwill in no time by shortchanging your principles. That's one. So now today, I think, because see, we are also $10 billion. We gave, when we have India-Africa Forum Summit, we gave $10 billion. We gave $600 million in grants. We gave them 50,000 scholarships. In my view, that $10 billion apart, because China gave $60 billion. So say 5 times your economy size. So they gave $60 billion. So they will compare with that, right? So today, Americans come with $20-30 billion. So do the others in their social sector, social infrastructure. So we need to find out the areas in which we can work, in which we have the capacity to deliver, and then move forward. That is what is important. But today we have to look at it, since you are a strategic affairs and defense, we have to look at it from that angle also, because we are losing the strategic space very fast to China.
Right. So one thing I wanted to ask, sir, there are some challenges also. I mean, if we see, I mean, going to Africa, that is different thing. We don't have high level engagement. We are lacking it, but there are challenges also. And on the other end, if we see this in terms of communications, we could make some headway in that country. Like Airtel has established a few, I mean, in few countries, it has established this line of communications and all that. So recently, if we see, I mean, if Afghanistan is our neighboring country, in Afghanistan, we have invested a lot. We are developing many projects, but like being Africa a big market, we have started intensive engagement now. So what is basically, I mean, where we are lacking basically? I mean, can you please?
You know, number one is you talked about communications, very important, right? But we had done a large number of projects in Africa in setting up their basic infrastructure, telecom infrastructure by TCIL in a very large number of countries in Africa in the 60s and 70s. We had laid out their railways. We had paved their roads. So we were there very much. But then about 20, 30 years, there was a big gap. Then it became more ad hocism because no leader would like to, everybody would prefer to go to USA or West or here and there. Africa, if you at all went, it was South Africa, which is not Africa in that sense of the term. Right, that became your major, because it's a developed country comparatively, large. So what now, then we have started another project, which is extremely important. I mentioned about Pan-Africa E-Network project. That is through satellite communications. I mean, we are providing the assistance in telemedicine, tele-education, which now has been changed into Arogya Bharati and Vidya Bharati and all that, creating and giving online degrees. Many of the leaders have done their 10th grade or graduation on online IGNOU degrees. So communication is provided by us. Then Airtel and other companies, if they want to go in, they are most welcome. Of course, they invite them. And it is a very big market for them. And Airtel has been doing a successful venture there. So this is what I'm saying. I mean, we can do that, and it should be seen also in a strategic perspective, the communications. You know what is happening, China's 5G.
Yes.
When we discuss 5G, we think as if the American 5G will not have espionage inbuilt in it. You know, so I mean, you can't be naive about these things. So it's normally the thing which happens there. So you are right, absolutely. We need to have a plan. The problem is that our industry also, I know whenever I used to host the Indian business delegations, their first thing used to be, I mean, in one go, you want to have business, sell, and they are not interested in that. It takes time for developing and for content. I mean, we can do a lot in agriculture in these countries.
Yes,
they have tremendous land, huge quantities of land. We have done some projects, but there are huge millions of hectares of land they're ready to give. When I was in charge, you know, I went and called on the president, and the president told me, he said, "You are so good in agriculture. Why don't you guys help us?" I said, "How much land can you give me?" He said, "As much as you want. The land is free." So I said, "For how long?" He said, "As long as you want." So, you know, this kind of a conversation I had with him. And he said, gave us then about 800 hectares for 30 years, right? Throwaway price for leasing. So I connected with some companies. One company came up from Punjab, and they took over whatever it was. They brought their own tractors, motorcycles, whatever from India. 3 people came only. There's a difference between us and China. 6 months later, when I visited again, the whole place was barren nearby. But when we arrived there to the plant, to the plantation, there were green fields all over. And there were 3 Indians standing there with hundreds of Africans. They were innovative. They used all the villagers' houses, the places for storing and giving them the employment, giving them the renters, increasing their incomes. So it was a very successful project. And then I used to cover Cameroon. Their president said, "Oh, you've done so well in Chad. Why can't you do it here?" So when we have these things, they can multiply, have a multiplier impact. So we need to work on that. That's very important. I mean, I'm not saying we've done amazingly well. We've done too much. But as I said, more can be done.
More can be done. Correct, sir. Thank you, sir. Raghav, sir, any more questions?
Dr. Sharma has.
Yeah,
Yeah,
sir,
please.
my only point was, it's a fantastic to learn strategically, but I think our governments have really neglected the Africans as a resources, because they have got huge natural resources, and we could have been really enjoying that had we planned it and had a better relations with them. Don't you think, sir?
No, sir. Relations we have with everybody, there's excellent relations bilaterally. But, you know, we have not looked at it from the exploitative point of view, right? So this is true. That is what the Chinese, the Americans, everybody else has tried to do. But we have tried to give them an equitable, I would say, share in our prosperity also. You know, we have not looked at it for, that's why you have a long-term vision in this sense of the term. We are importing 11, as I said, 11% of our oil comes from Nigeria alone, one country. So we have Angola is another country from where we are getting it. Botswana, so many diamonds. They are coming from Africa to India and polished and being exported all over the world. We are importing a lot of minerals from there, and we have tied up with many countries, companies, but not in an exploitative manner. What I'm trying to say is that if it is possible, we should have a win-win model. The win-win model is they are looking for investments, and there are challenges. And I must say, it is very difficult market to start and grow. Not easy. But then is India a very easy market too? No. Is it? Nowhere it is easy to do business. Everywhere it has challenges. And everyone who is in the international domain knows it. So from that perspective, I think that we need to plan. Now, fortunately, we have increased our embassies numbers. We have 18 more embassies, so they're roughly covering almost all area. And I'm sure that they will be getting more opportunities flagged.
I think today's session has been really terrific, and the ambassadorial authority with which Sir has presented Africa, it has probably it has put each one of us in romance with this land, this billion plus
Beautiful.
people, passion, and the activism. Sir seems to be more of an activist ambassador, that he did not just relax in his armchair, but he really went, and that is all reflective in his presentation. What a flow, what a authority, what a command of all the subjects. And there is a pain. The passion is coupled with that pain ki hum log baatein to kehkar aa gaye, but if things are not being done, the Chinese will again win over another geostrategic quarter over there. It's a major area, and India had its so I think we have really, it's the start, end of a grand beginning, and probably the theater of Africa, which probably in the MEA, the desk, they feel, oh, Africa is an isolated island, Europe or South America, the Far East. So they are the more exciting areas. But the way Sir has presented, I would say Africa is truly fascinating. So thanks a lot for your invaluable time, for really illumining us, and we will, through this forum, we will conduct more Africa-oriented sessions. Because this is, and as you said, the healthcare and the education connect, which India has been able to do beyond the infrastructure part, that is something which is so very important. Thanks a lot, Sir, for really educating us on this forum, and we're really indebted over here. Thanks a lot, Sir.
Such a pleasure.
Thank you, sir.
All the
Thank
very
you so
best
much.
to you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.